Hotep, everybody. This is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network and host of the African History Network show. It is Saturday, June 7th, 2025, and it is my 54th birthday. So thanks for all the birthday wishes. I'm going to do a very special presentation right now dealing with the history of Juneteenth and correcting the history of Juneteenth. And I actually delivered this presentation on Friday, June 6th, yesterday, for Wayne County Community College for their learning center for some professors there. Okay. And so this is a very short presentation. This is a boiled down version of a 2.5 hour, 3 hour presentation that I do dealing with the history of Juneteenth. Also, if you want to support the African History Network, support the work that I do, you can do so at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can support through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. And we'll post the information here. We have it here on the thread of the broadcast also. This helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting. Okay, so let's jump into this history. So contrary to popular belief, contrary to what you're going to hear, and I'm going to pull up my slideshow presentation, contrary to what you're going to hear this Juneteenth in the media, on CNN, MSNBC, etc., Juneteenth was not the last day of slavery. Juneteenth was not the last day of slavery. So we have to correct the history of Juneteenth and protect the history of Juneteenth. And let me change this right here. Okay, there we go. We have to correct the history of Juneteenth and protect the history of Juneteenth. Okay, so this presentation is Juneteenth was not the last day of slavery, correcting and protecting the history, using Juneteenth as a tool for education, using Juneteenth as a tool for education. So follow me on my social media platforms. We have the information at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Watch the African History Network show Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. On my social media platforms, and watch me on Roland Martin Unfiltered Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on the Black Star Network. Okay. All right. Now, in this presentation, we're going to talk about what is Juneteenth, why Juneteenth was not the last day of slavery, contrary to what you're going to hear in the media. We'll deal with why the Emancipation Proclamation did not free the slaves, why the Emancipation Proclamation did not free the slaves. Also, we'll deal with what was General Order Number 3. You're going to hear about General Order Number 3, which was delivered by Major General Gordon Granger on June 19th, 1865. But a lot of people have never read General Order Number 3. Okay. This is why we have to read these original documents. This is why we have to read these original documents. Okay, then also we'll deal with how to use Juneteenth as a tool to educate America on history, economics, law, and politics. Educate African Americans as well as America in general on history, economic, law, and politics. Okay, let's continue here. So what is Juneteenth and why is it celebrated? June 19th, 1865 in Galveston, Texas. General Order Number 3 was delivered by Major General Gordon Granger. And this is after April 9th, 1865, when General Robert E. Lee of the Confederacy surrenders to General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. And April 9th, 1865 is basically looked at as the end of the U.S. Civil War for all practical purposes. But keep in mind that the U.S. Civil War is going to go on for another 16 months or so, officially coming to an end in August of 1866, when President Andrew Johnson announces an official end to the U.S. Civil War. And what happened was, even though General Robert E. Lee was, even though his regiment was the largest Confederate regiment okay, in the Confederacy during the Civil War. It was not the only regiment, and he was not the only general. You had General Joseph E. Johnston of Tennessee. You had that traitor, that white supremacist Nathan Bedford Forrest, who went on to become the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. They had their own regiments as well, and terms of surrender had to be negotiated with each one of those generals also. The History Channel, history.com, they have an excellent article dealing with why the Civil War went on for another 16 months or 18 months or so. Okay, so check that out. All right, let's continue. Okay, so Major General Gordon Granger delivers General Order Number 3 on June 19th, 1865 in Galveston, Texas. And you have 2,000, he goes into Galveston with about 2,000 Union troops. Most of them are African-American men. And this is what he delivers. This is what he reads. Now, June 19th is and also, let me back up. What is Juneteenth? Okay. Juneteenth is a contraction of June 19th, also known as Jubilee Day, which is one of the early names of the celebration, Freedom Day, and also Texas Emancipation Day, National Independence Day, and Black Independence Day. Now, Juneteenth is the oldest internationally and one of the oldest nationally celebrated commemorations of the ending of slavery in the United States. It commemorates June 19th, 1865, when about 2,000 Union troops led by Major General Gordon Granger landed at Galveston, in Galveston, Texas, to take back control of Texas and bring Texas back into the Union and deliver General Order Number 3. So Texas was part of the Confederacy, okay, and it takes physical force to bring Texas back into the Union. General Order Number 3 announced the Civil War had ended and that the enslaved Africans were now free, enforcing the Emancipation Proclamation of January 1st, 1863. But as we're going to see, the Emancipation Proclamation is not what legally freed the enslaved Africans, not what ended chattel slavery. Okay, so Juneteenth is not the oldest celebration of emancipation or the end of slavery. Okay, Gallipolis, Ohio, has been celebrating the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation since September 22nd, 1863. Okay, so what was the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation? All right, history.com, official website of the History Channel, they have an excellent article dealing with the Emancipation Proclamation. So the Emancipation Proclamation was a military strategy that Abraham Lincoln used, and he was trying to bring the South back into the Union. The U.S. Civil War was not fought to end slavery. It was fought to bring the South back into the Union. The preliminary Emancipation Proclamation issued September 22nd, 1863, stated that the territories in rebellion, those that were part of the Confederacy, if they did not come back into the Union by January 1st, 1863, their slaves would be set free. Okay, and it was designed to rob the Confederacy of their most important asset, their enslaved Africans. However, because they separated from the Union, they seceded, set up their own government, set up their own constitution. Lincoln and the Union had no authority to dictate to them to do anything. Okay, so you have the celebration in Gallipolis, Ohio. And they've been celebrating that since September 22nd, 1863. Also, Black churches also often honor Watch Night with a New Year's Eve service that dates back to when enslaved African people stayed up to watch for freedom, because the Emancipation Proclamation took effect on midnight, January 1st, 1863, going into that morning, January 1st, 1863. And then Washington, D.C. celebrates Emancipation Day, April 16th, 1862. This commemorates April 16th, 1862, when President Abraham Lincoln signed into law the Compensated Emancipation Act of 1862, which abolished slavery in Washington, D.C., and it actually paid reparations to slaveholders. Now, people confuse this with thinking that all the slaveholders in the U.S. got reparations. No, that's false. This bill was sponsored by Henry Wilson, who was a U.S. senator, and he was an abolitionist. And this was designed to abolish slavery. This only applied to slaveholders in Washington, D.C., who received reparations. They got up to $300 for each slave that they owned. They had to submit a petition. It did not apply to all slaveholders in the U.S., okay? It's called the Compensated Emancipation Act of April 16th, 1862. All right, let's continue. So what did General Order Number 3 actually say? Now, when you hear about this and they show you this in the media for Juneteenth, they're only usually 9 times out of 10, they're only going to show you part of what it said. Okay. If you go to archives.gov, the U.S. National Archives website, look up General Order Number 3 there, you can read it. It says the people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free. Now, in most of the media coverage that you're going to see, they're going to stop right there. Okay. But that is not all that General Order Number 3 says. And this is why we have to go read the original documents. We have to go read the original documents. It went on to say, this involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor, employer and hired labor. So what it's actually telling the slaves on the plantation is to stay on the plantation and negotiate wages with your former slave master. Okay. Now, a lot of slaves left the plantation. They didn't stay, even though they were ordered to stay by General Order Number 3. A lot of them left anyway. Okay. Rightfully so. General Order Number 3 goes on to say the freedmen are advised to remain quietly, the former slaves, the freedmen, because we didn't keep calling ourselves slaves after slavery ended, which is problematic when you have some people wanting to call themselves descendants of slaves because they think they're going to be able to get reparations attaching themselves to slavery. But after slavery ended, we didn't call ourselves slaves. We called ourselves black freedmen or former slaves or ex-slaves or something like that. So why generations later, some 250 odd years later, after chattel slavery ended in 1865, why are we going to try to put our ancestors back into a status, back into a category that they fought to free themselves from? They took up arms. You had almost 200,000 African-American men who fought in the U.S. Civil War for their freedom and freedom of their families. Why are we going to try to put them back into a status that they worked to free themselves from? It goes on to say the freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere. Okay, so it's telling them to stay on the plantation, work out wages with your former masters, and you're not allowed to roam the countryside and leave the plantation, etc. Okay, this is what it said. Now, I totally understand when you read slave narratives on this, and blackpast.org has a really good article dealing with the history of Juneteenth. Jubilation broke out, celebrations broke out when they got the word. Okay. And that's totally understandable because many of us will have celebrations on Friday after we get off work and work Monday through Friday, and it's called happy hour. And we know we got to go back to work the next Monday, but we have celebrations. So I totally understand the celebrations, but it's important for us to understand what General Order Number 3 actually said, because we're going to see misrepresentations of it in the media, and they're going to continue to tell us that the Emancipation Proclamation freed the slaves when it actually did not, and it's documented that it did not. Okay, let's continue. Share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like. This is a very short, tight 30-minute presentation consolidating my 2.5, 3 hour presentation. This is the presentation I did yesterday on Friday June 6th, for Wayne County Community College, for some professors at Wayne County Community College. For more information on General Order Number 3, go to National Archives Safeguards Original Juneteenth General Order. That's at archives.gov, U.S. National Archives website. And also blackpast.org has a really good article, Juneteenth, the Growth of an African-American Holiday. And this was one of the really first extensive articles dealing with Juneteenth, going back probably about 10 years or so. Blackpast.org has about 6,000 articles dealing with African history and African-American history. Okay, now, why was Texas a safe haven for slave owners during the U.S. Civil War? Okay, in Texas, slavery had continued at the state as the state experienced no large-scale fighting or significant presence of Union troops. So there were not major battles during the Civil War in Texas. Many enslavers from outside the Lone Star State, outside of Texas, had moved to Texas with their slaves as they viewed it as a safe haven. So they're coming from places like Arkansas and Louisiana and Mississippi, things like this. And these slaveholders are going into Texas and taking their slaves with them. Now, after the Civil War came to a close in the spring of 1865, Major General Gordon Granger's arrival in Galveston, Texas, that June signaled freedom for Texas's 250,000 enslaved people. So you got 250,000 African slaves in Texas, but all of them did not get the word on June 19th that they were free, contrary to popular belief as well. Let's continue. Let's see why. Although emancipation didn't happen overnight for everyone, in some cases, enslavers withheld the information until after harvest season. Celebrations broke out among newly freed Black people, and Juneteenth was born. Okay, but originally it wasn't called Juneteenth. It's going to be called Jubilee Day or Texas Emancipation Day. That December 18th, 1865, slavery in America was formally abolished with the adoption of the 13th Amendment. Okay, when Georgia ratifies the 13th Amendment on December 6, 1865, Georgia becomes the 27th state to ratify the 13th Amendment, and then it becomes law and it's adopted December 18th, 1865. So for all of the people in the media, I saw Rachel Maddow talk about this last year. You're going to see all these people that get paid millions of dollars in the media. They're going to say the Emancipation Proclamation freed the slaves. They're going to say Juneteenth was the last day of slavery. Then you tell me, why is it that Kentucky and Delaware did not abolish slavery until December 18th, 1865, when the 13th Amendment was officially adopted? That's 6 months after Juneteenth. What are you talking about? I'm all for commemorating and celebrating Juneteenth, but we have to correct the history of Juneteenth and protect the history of Juneteenth. Okay, and we have to stop these lies and this misinformation from floating around. Read this article here from history.com. What is Juneteenth? Juneteenth and slavery in Texas. Okay, that's a really good article. All right, let's continue. Now, during the Civil War, Texas was a refuge for enslavers invading emancipation. Quote, slave owners in Arkansas, Tennessee, and Louisiana ran their Negroes from Arkansas, Louisiana, and other parts of the states into Texas because the U.S. Army had not reached Texas, said W. Marvin Delaney, a retired University of Texas Arlington historian and president of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, which was originally called Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, which was co-founded September 9th, 1915 by one of my heroes, Dr. Carter Godwin Woodson, also known as Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who in 1926 created Negro History Week, which later became known as Black History Month and African American History Month. So this is an excerpt from an excellent article from the Washington Post called "Why Juneteenth Didn't Actually End Slavery in Texas." Why Juneteenth did not actually end slavery in Texas. From June 19th, 2024, excellent article by Deneen L. Brown for Juneteenth. I've read dozens of her articles. She writes some really good articles, especially historical pieces. Now, Houston, keep in mind, Juneteenth, the 250,000 enslaved Africans in in Texas did not all find out on June 19th, 1865 that they were free. Okay. Houston, Texas was emancipated on June 20th, 1865. Austin, Texas wasn't liberated until June 23rd, 1865. Freedom came on different days in Texas because they're going, Major General Gordon Granger and his troops, they're going all throughout Texas, physically taking back control of Texas, bringing it back into the Union, and they're delivering this message. So they go through, some accounts show they go through almost 1 year throughout Texas, physically bringing Texas back into the Union. June 19th was the agreed upon date to celebrate the enslaved Africans in Texas getting their freedom, finding out that they were free. But emancipation comes on different dates throughout Texas. And also when we look at those different celebrations that I showed earlier, when we talk about the Compensated Emancipation Act, April 16th, 1862, when we talk about commemorating the watch night services, as what's going to happen is throughout the country, especially throughout the South, African Americans were commemorating when freedom, when emancipation came to their particular state also. So you're going to have different celebrations in different states in the country, depending upon when emancipation came to their state. This is a good article here, 5 Myths About Juneteenth, June 18th, 2020, from the Washington Post. So check out that article as well. All right, now slavery didn't end in states like Kentucky and Delaware, which had not seceded and therefore were not covered by Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation until December 18th, 1865, when the 13th Amendment was ratified. So the border states were exempt from the Emancipation Proclamation. Maryland, Missouri, Kentucky, and Delaware. The border states were along the border of the Mason-Dixon line, and these states separated the North from the South. They separated the free states from the slaveholding states. They all stayed loyal to the Union, so they were all allowed to keep their slaves. Maryland did not abolish slavery until November 1st, 1864. That's almost 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. You're not going to hear about that in mainstream media most of the time. The Washington Post has a really good article that I use in my classes when I teach this history. It's called "The Not Quite Free State of Maryland." It's from the Washington Post, and it deals with this history. Maryland put it on the ballot. They had to vote to determine whether or not to free the slaves, and it almost did not pass. Okay, it almost did not pass. So this is a deep history behind this. More than 100 Texas newspapers mentioned the Emancipation Proclamation between 1862 and 1865. Okay, so we have evidence that all throughout Texas, the white people in Texas knew about the Emancipation Proclamation. Also, they knew that General Robert E. Lee surrendered, things of this nature. The real reason African people were still in bondage when the Union troops arrived in June of 1865 is because of local leaders there in Texas. The Texas Confederate Constitution prohibited manumission. The Texas Confederate Constitution prohibited the slaves being freed. Abraham Lincoln's directive was enforced only when federal soldiers got to Texas in June of 1865. Once again, 5 Myths About Juneteenth from the Washington Post. Now, why did the Emancipation Proclamation of January 1st, 1863, why did it not free the slaves? Contrary to what you're going to hear in the media. On September 22nd, 1862, Abraham Lincoln issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, which declared that as of January 1st, 1863, all enslaved people in the states currently engaged in rebellion against the Union shall be then thenceforward and forever free. Okay, that's the Confederacy. Okay, the Confederate States of America. They and the first state to secede from the Union was South Carolina, December 20th, 1860, 6 weeks after Abraham Lincoln becomes president-elect, because the South thinks Lincoln is going to free the slaves. Now, Lincoln did not actually free all of the approximately 4 million men, women, and children held in slavery in the United States when he signed the formal Emancipation Proclamation that following January 1st, 1863. The document applied only to enslaved African people in the Confederacy and not to those in the border states like Maryland, Missouri, Kentucky, and Delaware, north of the Mason-Dixon line. Okay, and these states stayed loyal to the Union, so they were allowed to keep their slaves, as I stated. Now, although it was presented chiefly as a military measure, the Emancipation Proclamation marked a crucial shift in Abraham Lincoln's views on slavery. Emancipation would define the Emancipation Proclamation would define the Civil War, turning it from a struggle to preserve the Union to one focused on ending slavery, and set a decisive course for how the nation would be reshaped after that historic conflict. Read this article from history.com, official website of the History Channel, Emancipation Proclamation. Okay, so now, as I stated, slavery didn't end in Kentucky and Delaware until December 18th, 1865. And these are border states that stayed loyal to the Union. Georgia, when Georgia became the 27th state to ratify the 13th Amendment on December 6, 1865, this legally ended chattel slavery in this country. So you have many people who say we should be celebrating December 6, 1865, either in addition to Juneteenth, or they'll say instead of Juneteenth, that's the date we really should celebrate. I think we should celebrate both of them and teach this history. Okay. The National Museum of African American History from the Smithsonian, they have a good article at their website, 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. Okay, so check that out. All right, now, when we look at Juneteenth celebrations, although news of emancipation came at different times during that Texas summer and autumn 1865, local African Americans gradually settled on June 19th as their day of celebration. All 250,000 slave Africans did not find out on June 19th that they were free. Okay, as I talk about in my presentations, Major General Gordon Granger and the 2,000 Union troops, they were traveling on horseback, not in Escalades. Okay, they didn't have cell phones and social media and text messages and emails. Okay, so everybody did not find out on the same date. Beginning in 1866, African Americans held parades, picnics, barbecues, and gave speeches in remembrance of their liberation. By 1900, the festivities had grown to include baseball games, horse races, street fairs, rodeos, railroad excursions, and formal balls. Okay, formal dances. Two distinct trends emerged with these early celebrations. First, the oldest of the surviving former slaves were often given a place of honor. That place of honor rose in direct proportion to the dwindling numbers of survivors with each passing year. Secondly, African Americans in Texas initially used these gatherings to locate missing family members, and soon they became staging areas for family reunions because we're trying to put the family back after slavery. Okay, one of the first things we did was get married and search for lost loved ones who were sold off. By the year 1900, Juneteenth had unofficially become Texas Emancipation Day and was sponsored by Black churches and civic organizations. Indeed, Juneteenth was so prominent that white politicians, including various Texas governors, addressed the largest gatherings, which sometimes included upwards of 5,000 people, in Houston, Texas, and Dallas, Texas. Juneteenth had by this point surpassed the 4th of July as the biggest holiday of the year for Texas African Americans. So blackpast.org, once again, excellent article, Juneteenth, the growth of an African American holiday. Check that out. Now, Texas passes a bill on June 7th, 1979. So today's that anniversary. June 7th, 1979, becoming the first state in the nation to make Juneteenth an official holiday. History.com has this article: Texas passes a bill becoming the first state in the nation to make Juneteenth an official holiday. And then on June 17th, 2021, after the bill passes the House of Representatives of the U.S. Senate, sponsored by the late Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas, African-American member of the House of Representatives, Sheila Jackson Lee, Juneteenth becomes a federal holiday on June 17, 2021, where President Joe Biden signs the bill into law that passed the House and the Senate. This is the first federal holiday that recognizes slavery. Juneteenth is the first federal holiday that recognizes slavery. Okay. NBCnews.com has this article: Biden signs into law bill establishing Juneteenth as federal holiday, June 17, 2021. So as we see this attack on African-American history, the teaching of African-American history, the attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially coming from the second Trump administration, the attack coming from various states like Florida, etc., on the teaching of this history, we also have to realize that in all of our Juneteenth celebrations, we have to incorporate history, economics, law, and politics. History, economics, law, and politics. Juneteenth has to be used as a tool of education, liberation, and a fight for reparations. Juneteenth gives us an opportunity. It forces America to have a conversation about a history that Republicans and state legislatures are passing laws to suppress the teaching of that history. And we see an attack on that history coming from the second Trump administration, whether it's attack on the Smithsonian African American Museum or what can be taught in colleges, etc. Okay, we have to incorporate what I call HELP: history, economics, law, and politics, because America needs a massive history lesson. All right. So in all of our Juneteenth celebrations, we have to incorporate this. Juneteenth cannot become a black version of the 4th of July, where we have a day off from work and we have a barbecue and we get drunk or drink alcohol and play spades, things of this nature. We can have fun at Juneteenth celebrations, but we have to use it as a tool to educate ourselves and educate America on a history that laws are being passed to suppress the teaching of that history. Books are being banned in schools that teach various aspects of African-American history and slavery and the civil rights movement, etc. Okay, so why is this history important? Okay, what you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. Okay. And the people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past and the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. And as two of my teachers, Dr. Leonard Jeffries and Professor James Small, correctly say, African history gives us our foundation, gives us our values, our interests, and our principles, and influences our economic empowerment and political empowerment. So we have to have a synthesis of all three of these. Okay, so this is a short presentation here. Hopefully you learned a lot. This is a post that I did a few years ago dealing with Juneteenth, because after the death, after George Floyd was murdered May 25th, 2020, that next month, Juneteenth was celebrated, and a lot of people learned about Juneteenth. A lot of African Americans learned about it who really didn't know about it, especially up north, because we were dealing with COVID. A lot of people were home, and Juneteenth took on a new meaning. I did this post on Facebook. I said reparations, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, voting rights, etc., are all connected to Juneteenth and the history of what happened after the Civil War. Okay, America needs a massive history lesson. So happy Juneteenth, happy Texas Emancipation Day, Jubilee Day, Freedom Day, and the fight continues. Hopefully you learned a lot from this presentation. You can support the African History Network, $ the AHN show through Cash App. Visit my website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, and just scroll down the page. We have information. We have my bundle pack of my lectures, 15 DVD bundle pack, and it's in digital download format. African History Awakens the African Mind for Mental Death. But also, you can register for my online classes that I teach as well, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. You can download the lesson plan here. I do that on Saturdays, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But we also have my PayPal and Cash App information here. Okay, so this helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, and you can click on the link here. This is our Cash App account, $ the AHN show. It'll say Michael. It'll probably show my picture there. These other ones are fake African History Network Cash App accounts. They've been stealing money from us. I'm still trying to get them shut down. When you click on our link here, this is our QR code for Cash App as well. So you can scan that if you want to support us. We definitely need the support that helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, etc. And then also for PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. All right. Well, look, we have to get out of here. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct wrong behaviors, not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next time. Peace. Thanks for watching today. Thanks for the birthday wishes as well. Okay. I guess 54 years went by quickly, I guess. So I don't feel any different today. I've lost, 35 pounds in the last couple of years, so I can fit back into clothes I haven't been able to fit back into in years. I worked out this morning, so I'm staying in shape.